Assalamu alaikum. Good evening and welcome to a new segment in our program. My name is Rana and joining me today are two guests. First we have Muaz Masood joining us from Egypt and also Yahya Ibrahim from Canada. Now the topic of today's discussion is what is spirituality? So I would like to pose this question to you gentlemen first. Why are people today spiritual as they may have been in the times before?
Okay, I think in a nutshell, to answer that question, we'd have to look at the fact that nowadays there seems to be what people think is a sufficient alternative to the existence of a God.
That's a very good point. I completely agree with that. I think looking from our system as Muslims, we see that spirituality is a constant process, something that we're always working on day to day. We do it in physical means, we do it in ritual means, some are internal, some are external. It's a constant process of purifying ourselves and making sure that we ascend in nearness towards our Creator.
What we would call spiritual progress.
Exactly, what we would call spiritual progress. Spiritual progress is also seen as an ongoing process. And I'm sure that you can relate to that. It's something where, as a person, you're never content with where you are. You always want to make yourself a better individual.
So it's not divorced in any way, shape, or form from daily lives. It's not this thing that it's between me and some metaphysical power and it has nothing to do with the world.
No, definitely not. In part of our beliefs and faith as Muslims, we believe that the way we relate to other people is directly correlated to how God will view us and how close and near we are to Him.
So it has spiritual implications.
Definitely.
So with then coupling what we both have just said, I think it makes a lot of sense to look at the way the world now. Because again, I think that when people did not have what they thought, this false ground that they're standing on, what they thought can explain away God, then you were kind of forced to stick to some sort of moral code. You were morally responsible.
Of course, you have to be morally aware and then morally responsible. You have to know what your rights are and what the rights you need to extend to others should be. Spirituality, it's something that governs everything in life. And I think as Muslims we value that greatly, that we see that spiritual, it's an internal process that manifests outwardly. So it's something that we take care of ourselves, our thoughts, our beliefs, our intentions towards others, towards ourselves, and our acts of worship. And it manifests itself in proper conduct and at times reprehensible conduct. So it's important for us to see that even the difficult points that we encounter in our life, it's a spiritual building process.
And I think that's very, very difficult for somebody who has denounced the very existence of spirituality to work out at all, because I think that, if you don't even believe something exists,
yes,
your spirit, then that's why it's so easy to see moral degeneration in the world.
Definitely. We always hear each and every day at different times, you'll hear about people who are what we would see outwardly as the pinnacles of society in terms of wealth, in terms of status, in terms of fame. But then you hear stories of this individual wanted to end their life abruptly, this individual is disconnected from his family, this individual is charged with a particular crime, and you question yourself and you would ask, with someone with such fame and status and at times even nobility, what would cause them to enter into these reprehensible acts and deeds? And it all comes down to this spiritual process and how we as individuals need to retouch ourselves with spirituality. And I'm sure that you can comment on the fact that technology today is at times in the way that it's being used. We know that technology, it's basically the application of sciences to the betterment of humanity. That's the main concept behind technology. But I'm sure that you can comment on that a little bit further to see that technology now, that initial definition, humanity's straying a little bit away from it.
I believe so. I think that it all goes back to how we define the betterment of humanity. It goes back to what we think is better for a human being. If a human being is only made up of the material existence, which is the dominant belief of secular materialism nowadays, then it is better for a human being to, to just think of something that's just misused or abused right now. The technology is being misused in.
We can quote and we can...
Oh, the internet, for example.
Definitely.
Right. I mean, if it's
thinking of that as well. Yeah.
If it's better for a human being to, for example, date as many, if I'm talking from a man's perspective, date as many women as possible. Then here we are, let's use the internet, hence you get all these advertisements on Hotmail and stuff, date again, every week, I don't know what. This is from the perspective of you only live once. Because if you really think you're not going to be resurrected after you die, then it is better for you to enjoy yourself as much as possible in as little time as possible, get as much outward physical enjoyment.
And take advantage of the technology.
And use it to, you have this technology subservient to you in that direction.
True.
But if you think it's better for you to have a proper marital relationship with a woman, I'm talking again from a man's perspective, and vice versa, then you may think that all these things are perverted.
Yeah. I also want to give a little bit of comparability with how technology was established in the past. And we can look at the great Renaissance period and what preceded it. In society today, especially in Western civilization, we seem to attribute a lot of our civilized behavior, technological advances to what occurred in the Renaissance period, which is the rebirth of knowledge. But what is failed to be understood by many people is what were termed as the Dark Ages, whereas we as Muslims, we see them as the ages of brilliance and light and radiance.
Exactly.
And I think it would be nice if you could tell us something a little bit about how Muslims contributed to the betterment of humanity through the proper usage of technology to bring about all of the different luxuries that we are using today.
Well, I'll tell you about the theory because I don't have an example in mind just yet. There's many, of course, but I think that in essence the universe was looked upon as another book of God.
Yes.
And so here you are you have your Qur'an, your final revelation from God, and then you have the universe, that world that same God who has revealed your scripture, that world that same God has created. And so there's no contradiction, there is no split between mosque and science, if you will, like church and state. And so it actually became exciting to go out there with a head start, words from your own creator, and check out the universe. And I mean, every verse in the Quran, every other verse just would be something like, well, don't you comprehend? Don't you understand? Have they not looked and contemplated the heavens and the earth, the creation of the universe?
Well, it'd be interesting to note that the second most used concept in the Quran is the word ilm, or knowledge.
Knowledge, yeah.
And that's a very important part of Islamic spirituality, that to learn how to be near God is more important at times as actually being in the servitude of God. And there's narrations from the Prophet of Islam, peace and blessings be upon him, and all the prophets that preceded him, where he says that the knowledgeable individual is one who is of benefit to himself and to others. He's like a candle. So he's brilliant and radiant, and he gives off light to others who are in and around him.
And this is why I think another necessary manifestation of what's happening in the world today is that knowledge itself has been reduced to reason.
Yes.
And so knowledge itself is just understanding exactly how things work, trying our best to, but not thinking of how things are useful towards a spiritual enhancement. It's just, this is how the atoms in this glass work. Yeah, but is it okay if I take this glass and bash it on someone's head or not? It doesn't really matter. It could be right from your perspective, could be wrong from mine.
True.
And then hence this other introduction of this other concept known as moral relativism, again with the denouncing of spirituality. Moral relativism is basically holds that, again, what may be right for me may be wrong for you. There is no objectivity of good and evil. These are things that we've just adapted and could be, they could vary. They could vary.
I think also, getting back to the concept of technology, seeing how, for example, just to name a few small examples or drops from the ocean of examples of Islam's contribution to the building of the Renaissance. We see, for example, the primary medical textbook up until the 18th century was written by Avicenna, or as we would commonly call him, Ibn Sina. Also, the first individuals to place optics in front of the eyes to better the vision of individuals was an Islamic innovation. The concepts of alchemy, or what we today refer to as chemistry, its origins were Islamic. Initially, people would study the chemical elements to try to mix them together as elixirs for prolonging life, or to change inanimate objects into gold. But Muslims came and restructured the way people thought. and produced a nomenclature that could be followed by future scientists that we still appreciate today. The numeric number system, the Arabic numbers that we appreciate, the numerals, all of these, and the cipher or the zero, all of these are Islamic innovations that came to be.
Well, now it's coming back to me as well, like the binary code, for example.
Definitely.
You know, the other cause is algebra.
Yes.
You know, it's hisab al-jab.
Yes.
It's actually an Arabic word, al-jab.
Yep.
And then it's been taken in, I think al-Khwarizmi himself
Yep.
is what algorithm is.
Yes.
That's his name, but having gone through, I think,
Even
Latin.
with the beginning of the university, which all started back with the Muslims when they went to knowledge about Islam, and not just about Islam, also about other sciences. So they started from the Muslims as well.
From that we get the concepts of the chair at the university chair. We get it from the scholars of Islam. They used to sit on an elevated position above their students. Also the robes and the garments that are worn in the graduation ceremonies, they're very symbolic, that take from the Islamic traditions that established. The very first university unanimously accepted as a historical fact, the very first university is Azhar University, where you initially are from Cairo.
Yep.
So we see these are very important contributions that we've given to civilization. And we also see that technology at that time, it was used to discover, for a lack of better words, God.
Right.
Or to discover what God has given us. The Qur'an was the word of God, and the universe was the application of God's word.
Yeah.
So we would try to discover the different things. Would you tend to agree with a statement like that?
I would. I also would. The way I see it is that, especially after you described a lot of these people, and again, it's an ocean, and these are just little drops. There definitely are things. And then to me, you know, the thing about it is, that's why I couldn't remember it. There's just so much, you don't even know where to go from, where to start from. But all these people, what seems coherent here is that this myth that exists nowadays, that if you're spiritual, then you cannot have any technological advancements, you cannot have anything to do with the technological world or with the betterment of humanity, is just completely dispelled, because all these people they were at the epitome of spiritual progress, and here they are at the epitome of material progress. Hence the book of God and the other book of God, the universe, meet. And so this split is only in people's minds.
It's great that you raised that. I think there's something I would like for you to address. We've spoken about all the negative attributes now. You know, we've spoken about people coming away from spirituality. Now, what are some practical, cause-effective steps that people can take to regain their spirituality, regardless of their faith?
Well, okay, I think that one thing that is definitely common ground, and again, regardless of their faith, as you put it, is one being in touch with one's heart. I think that another myth that modern science needed to bring about nowadays, because it had to maintain its secular materialistic views, was the myth that you are nothing but your brain, your consciousness is in your brain, your mind is in your brain, your heart is just a blood pumping organ. And this is something that modern science itself, if you're going to be honest and look into it, if they're going to be honest with you, will tell you it's not substantiated. Reality, we don't know where consciousness is just yet.
So you're speaking of the proverbial heart, the ability to be conscious.
Yes, I'm speaking of the proverbial heart. I'm speaking of viewing reality with a moral twist, if you will. Being able to realize that if you were helped by an individual in the morning, you had a flat tire and you were stuck on a highway, and this person came, you don't know this person came and helped you with the tire, gave you their phone, gave you a ride, everything. And then that same night you're walking around the street somewhere and this person is laying there dying, bleeding to death, he's unconscious, he can't see you, you look at the person, you have an option. You can go out there and help them, or you can go away, nobody can see you, nobody material can see you. And you decide to go away. When you go away, that tightness you feel in your chest, that is in essence the proverbial heart, the spiritual heart, manifesting something in the physical heart, reminding you an expanded chest or a tight, constrained chest. That feeling is not a feeling that is just adapted. It's not just a feel that, hey, I've just been told by society to feel that. That is a genuine feeling. That is a real feeling. That is a spiritual feeling. That is the spiritual idea of right and wrong. This is us being at our very human, at our highest human potential. And to suppress that and to just walk off and have that feeling inside for a while, that is ignoring the heart, the proverbial heart as you put it. So I think going back to the heart, realizing that these intuitive feelings are not just blood pumping organ induced. These are realities that manifest in the physical heart. But again, it's the proverbial spiritual heart.
So we are in need of God.
Oh yeah.
We are in need of God.
We're in dire need of God. We're in dire need of purpose. Other verse is also, we, again the royal we of power, we are closer to the human being than his or her own jugular vein.
Yes.
And so this understanding that it's this we that get distracted away from God. And that in reality it's just a consciousness, an ascension to a higher consciousness, a moral responsibility once again, the fulfillment of the potential of humanity, and we realize that, hey, I am so close to my Creator. And this is why the other song I like to quote is the Nothing Else Matters, by this old song by Metallica, one of their rather more quiet songs. So close, no matter how far. And this is an idea that I think is very applicable. And these are why these meanings bring about these timeless realities. In that same journal you gave me, they said music, the human being appreciates music as the sound. I read that in your magazine. And so this is why when music, coupled with higher timeless meanings, ends up provoking this really spiritual reality inside of you, and you find yourself many times going with the song. Like, for example, just real quick, touch upon a meaning you were saying a little bit earlier, how you said this personal relationship, and how servitude sounds like a turnoff for some people. And I agree with them because they only see the chore, they only see the burden. But what was Bryan Adams seeing when he sang, everything I do it for you? How was he able? It's out of love that he's become a slave. But he's willingly become a slave, which is what Islam is, submissiveness. You willingly become a slave because you acknowledge that the being that you are serving is the one and only reality. This being is the one who made you. This being is the one who gave you your very ability to love. This being will love you back like nothing else. That's why Bryan Adams says, I know he was singing to a woman, but again I'm saying that those feelings are inside of us, and we can gear them towards whatever we choose, and so we should choose them to be geared towards God, the maker of everything. He does sing to that, saying, there's no love like your love, and no other could give more love. There's nowhere unless you're there all the time. You know, and he goes all the way, and yeah, whatever. So it's very interesting that those feelings are inside of us.
So what do you think is the reason why people are now having this split with spirituality? What do you think is causing that?
I think they've disconnected themselves from the three eternal elements. There are three elements that must be together for a person to have a soul purpose towards God. They are, as was introduced, love. You have to have a tremendous amount of love, and that love also breeds fear. Not fear of the Creator, but fear of disappointing or the shortcoming. And at the same time, having hope that your fear of the shortcomings will be forgiven, and that your shortcomings will be overlooked due to the overwhelming love of God towards us. And our aim is to earn the love and the mercy of God. We recognize that we can never pray enough or fast enough or do enough righteous deeds to earn, eternal paradise or Jannah. But our deeds are simply targeted towards the mercy of God. And therefore these three elements are always together. The love of our Creator, which instills in us fear that we are short in what He is deserving of. And that's why God tells us in the Qur'an, O ye who believe, have the consciousness, the piety, the awareness, the love, the fear, the hope of God in the measure that He is most deserving of you. And for God to put it in this way, well, how much is God deserving of me?
Infinitely.
It's an infinite measure. So there's always going to be a shortcoming from your side. So you're fearful that you haven't loved God enough and translated that into practice, which leads you also to have a tremendous amount of hope. You are hopeful that with your shortcomings, God will accept you due to His love for you and due to your love of Him. And I'm sure that Mu'izz can mention to us some of the ramifications of the love of God. There are different prophetic statements of the Prophet where he says that when an individual is loved by God, God orders the angels and the inhabitants of the earth to also have love for him, and that the love descends on the earth for that particular individual.
And hence, this person is one of those genuine people again.
Definitely.
That you meet and you see, there's an attraction to a person, and that usually is a spiritual attraction. That usually is a spiritual attraction. Another implication of this love is the godliness, the elevation towards the potential, the fulfillment of human potential within us, that you become a godly type person, takun rabbani, as is known in that narration. And another one where God says, I love that person, if we end up, again, fulfilling what you just mentioned earlier, to the point that I become the eyes by which that person sees the world. And I become the ears that person hears, and the hands or arms and the legs that he walks upon. So it's this idea of being so selfless, that viewing the world from the divine perspective. And I think that that creates an intimacy that is that needle that is not in the haystack. It's the intimacy that one mystic or Gnostic described it in the following words. He said, it is the feeling you get when you find a long-lost old friend.